So glad to have you guys join us on XeoCast at AUVSI 2024. Can't believe we're doing, another one already. It seems like 2023 in Denver was just yesterday. So I want to hear from you guys on who you are and what you're doing.
Joe Darden. I work for Iridium. We're a satellite communications company, and in the drone space we provide beyond visual line of sight command and control, and also we have voice services, so communicating from the pilot to air traffic control over VHF as well.
Great.
Hello, Bronwyn.
Hello, Michelle. Glad to have you again.
Thank you. It's good to be here. My name is Michelle Duquette. I work for the MITRE Corporation, a federally funded research and development center that supports, the center I'm in supports the FAA, and I focus on a UAS immigration, commercial space immigration portfolio.
Fantastic. Eno.
Hey, Eno Umoh from Baltimore. Been in the drone industry since 2015. First got in on the services side, and now we transitioned to more consultation where we help other drone companies who are looking to get into the industry and understand how to actually run a business. We do a lot of work also on the African continent, in Nigeria and Kenya and South Africa as well, and just excited to be at events like this to just learn and just see how far the industry is going, and where we're all going from here as well. So
Fantastic. Great. Matt.
Hi, Bronwyn.
Hello.
I work for a company called the Technology Partnership in Cambridge, and we've developed off the back of a long relationship with Inmarsat, now Viasat, SATCOM terminals that we're taking to market under the Gotonomi brand, targeted at BVLOS operations, operating on the L-band. I'm new to this industry, and I'm here to learn. Thank you for your patience with me.
And I'm Michael Vincent. I'm from NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, and I'm the Associate Project Manager for the System-Wide Safety Project, so looking at how we can improve safety management systems for emerging technologies as well as commercial aviation in the future.
Man, that's what we all need. That's what we all need right now. Well, let's kind of jump into this. I'm really interested, with the theme of autonomy for this year's show. What have you seen that has been interesting to you, or exciting, or kind of got your, interest? What do you think?
I think it's interesting because, and this is kind of a little bit of a NASA vernacular, but there's a big difference between autonomy and automation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we see a lot of automation. I don't think we're seeing a lot of true autonomy. Mm-hmm. Autonomy means the machine is making decisions on the edge,
Mm-hmm.
Based on, predefined criteria, whereas automation is, it's just following direct orders, right? The machine is just doing what you tell it to do. And I think we're seeing that start to an inflection point where we're starting to see more of the autonomy take over. Mm-hmm. I think that word gets thrown around a lot without really clearly understanding what it means. But I think we're starting to see convergence in terms of different modes of communication, and we're seeing different modes of transport. So you see a lot of the surface vehicles and subsurface maritime vehicles in this show.
Growing.
A lot more of the land-based vehicles. Mm-hmm. This year, I think we've seen a hiatus of that in the last couple of years, but now we're starting to see that come back. Autonomous or automated.
Absolutely. Almost every industry is moving to autonomy.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of connection points, a lot of need for computing power, for safety, communication links. Michael, I'm curious, what are you seeing on the floor that has been interesting to you, that you maybe were surprised by?
So I've tried my best to get around to everything and talk to as many people as possible, and I guess I'll tell you what I haven't seen, and this is coming from the safety program, and also one of my other roles is the airworthiness chair or vice chair at Langley. I don't see a lot of work being done in the assurance of the autonomous systems. So doing the V&V that an autonomous agent, an actual autonomous agent, is actually going to do or perform the task that the requirements set out for it to do. And that's something, it's been an education for me because that's not my background, but listening to the experts on my project, it's kind of like, oh wow, yeah, maybe we should be thinking about this. And so I see a lot of really early demonstrators, but it hasn't gotten to the point where we're looking at, okay, well, what if we set this autonomous agent loose out, in an urban area?
That is interesting. What are you seeing, on the floor that you said, wow, I didn't expect that?
I would say just from an entrepreneurship perspective, just the depth of the different companies that are here, the software, the manufacturing, hardware as well, and just the service providers. So just seeing that, the energy is there, the passion is still there. It's such a vast space where we're seeing, all these technologies, and then a lot of the collaboration that's going on, as well. You see companies that are, literally have, shared booths, and they have technologies that they're sharing, and that is really what the industry I see is built on. I can imagine other industries that aren't as open with information and sharing and technology, but I can see here it's one big goal that we all have, right? And even though the autonomy conversation is evolving over time, what better place to collaborate and talk, right, in person?
Absolutely.
And this I think was like the essence of the show.
Agreed. Michelle.
I'm going to spin off of that because I am just amazed at the collaborative teams that are popping up all over the place, whether they are part of a government effort like the Beyond program or something like that, or whether they are just states that are working amongst themselves. Those collaborations are generating a lot of learning, and it's fantastic. I just came off of a panel where it was a very strong women's panel, and the FAA and industry agreed that they're going to spend some deliberate energy on figuring out how they better share that information, not necessarily data. Everybody's collecting a lot of data, but you've got to translate that into something that's meaningful for you, meaningful for you, or for me.
Right.
And they're doing that and walking out on the floor and seeing all of those partnerships and the discussions. That's what's got me excited, and the level of discussion. So we're at a time now where I think this industry has finally found its group, and they're able to speak to one another apples to apples, and the energy is crazy.
That's a really interesting point that you made there, in that everybody kind of now understands the terminology, how things work. And the potential connectivity elements, and that's what I need that. Didn't know that I needed that before, but now I get how it works. And that brings up an interesting place also for you as well. What are you seeing?
I would echo the point about how much gets done through collaboration and partnerships, and that has not been present in some of my previous career positions, because on one hand you've got some of the special purpose or military where there's a lot of genuine activity, but you're not going to make a lot of public noise about it, through to the very glossy air taxi on a longer horizon, but you could almost believe it's right here, right now, through to things like logistics. And something that made my jaw drop is that a company called Area Loop, I spoke to them. They're operating out of Ecuador, and in the city of Quito, they've got 12 drones running BVLOS flights for logistics with 5 uncrewed drone ports, right here, right now, across an urban area. And the focus of their conversation was a step up from people planning that's in this year, next financial year, etc. So that was amazing to see. I guess there is a regulation, not void maybe, but a certain ease of regulation in that market that's allowed them to get ahead. So that is a very different paced conversation. And then the other is that the company I work for is we're not a manufacturing enterprise. We're going to have to go into partnerships for that and license deals. And a company called Avionics Networks put under my nose a product where they've integrated our modem already. I'd found out about it last week, but they found a solution. They've integrated it with a 5G solution, and they're saying this is what we need, and we're moving ahead. Let's talk about how we can expand this. So it's so dynamic that the people that are getting stuff done. Whereas if you have a conversation the next minute, it's like I'm the 12 months behind type thing. So it's a real race.
Absolutely. And I think now with the miniaturization of so much tech, now these smaller aircraft can properly utilize these tools to deliver against their objectives and goals. So I'm super excited about that. And then there are solutions that have yet to be developed. And because people are not sure yet even what the problem is, so I think we're going to continue to see that. But as we think about integration, and Michael, I think this might be really interesting to hear your perspective around how do we integrate, we're a ways away from full autonomy,
Sure.
to Joe's point, there's a lot of safety and connectivity, computing, all the things that we were talking about earlier. But how do we integrate all of this autonomy, which is coming on the horizon, safely into the airspace from your perspective,
Oh, well, the data sharing is a huge deal. I spent a lot of time working with the future visions of the airspace, either through the FAA or we have the FAA's infocentric NAS or information-centric NAS. They're targeting like 2030, 40 timeframe, and NASA's Sky for All vision, which is even beyond that, which is like a fully integrated system. That's the big common theme is, even if you are segregating these aircraft from the full national airspace or, doing it piecewise, there has to be that common picture across all the participants out there. So from the drone hobbyist, you have to tailor the information to that. They have to know what is safe, what isn't. The person who's doing beyond visual line of sight needs to know, hey, this part of the airspace is going to be closed because I'm from Langley, where the Air Force Base is, so there may be an F-22 there. Yeah. And then even getting into the future airspace, it could be something in the realm of like digital communication or a digital mode of flight, and that's just something that's going to happen. And what I've experienced with a lot of partners is they're very protective of the intellectual property, and the same thing with airlines and all kinds of service providers. But there has to be a way in the future that we have to share that data so we know what to expect with any given operation.
Well, I couldn't agree with that more. So that is part of the conversation that I just came from.
Yeah.
And it's how do we balance the need for service providers to get a return on their investment, have proprietary data or software or whatever it is, but still enable the enterprise.
Yeah.
And that's a big challenge. So we've got people that are coming up with fantastic solutions, and we're unable to exercise an implementation at a level that raises all ships.
Yeah.
That's a big challenge right now. And part of it is because we don't have, we haven't done that translation yet from the legacy rules and regulations to the drone industry.
Yeah.
So we're still working on that part.
That's interesting.
I mean, we now speak as like a drone industry. We may be speaking the same language. We have the same terms for everything. We understand. But when we look further out, we see a lot of operators that have very different visions of the future and different time frames of when they want to implement it. So see anything from remotely piloted to a safety pilot to fully autonomous. And, they all are operating under different assumptions of what the future is going to look like. And that's going to be a challenge because it goes back to the proprietary thing. They want to be ahead. The person who's doing the autonomous stuff wants to hold on to it until it's, everything's ready, and the person who's doing remotely piloted may be a little bit more open to it because it's a little more near term. Yeah.
Well, now, Joe, from a communications perspective and your work on and commitment to BVLOS, how do you see us doing this safely? I mean, you're right in the center of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a regulatory framework, we've really set things up for people to use their own proprietary ways to meet the regulations. The regulations just exist, and it says thou shalt do X. How you do X, it's up to you as a service provider. So I think that's an important framework. And there's some data sharing and stuff that definitely needs to happen, and sharing best practices, and we all have to establish a common language to talk to. But to use an example, right? So Iridium is a satellite constellation. We have 80 satellites in orbit, and they circle the Earth about every 100 minutes. They're about the size of a Mini Cooper. That's the size of our satellite. They're traveling at about 17,000 miles per hour. We have a team of remote pilot, that we call them space flight controllers, in our Space Network Operations Center that fly the satellites 24/7. So our satellite network is basically a network of drones that are in low Earth orbit. And it's all the same dynamics, right? And we launched our constellation about 25 years ago. And when we first launched, we had 50 space flight controllers. Today we have 2 that can operate the entire network from their iPhone.
Really?
We didn't get there overnight. And I think that's the biggest challenge for this industry is it doesn't happen overnight. We're not going to get there overnight, but you have to make slow incremental changes and go from zero automation and 100% manual effort to implementing some automation and taking routine tasks and management and implementing those as standard operating procedures, and then growing that, and then redesigning your vehicles to include more autonomy and making decisions on the edge. And it took us 25 years, and we're still making changes and making adjustments to our flight dynamics and to our systems and to our procedures so that we can continue to kind of evolve and scale. And I think that's one word that this industry really is, it's an important inflection point today, is how do we scale the operation, right? Because the military's got a lot of technology to fly, the Reapers and et cetera, right? But it takes 50 to 75 humans per aircraft to fly that mission, right? And we just had an operator get a waiver and an exemption to fly beyond visual line of sight. They have a crew of about 5 humans that fly 1 aircraft. That doesn't scale long term, right? The delivery guys that are delivering food and all these other kinds of things, it's really amazing, it's great, right? But if you had to pay $75 for a cup of Starbucks, that's the real cost, right? They're eating some of that cost because they want to get to scale, but how do you get to scale? So the same thing that we did, we took 50 space flight controllers, and now we're at 2 flying, roughly 1 to 40 aircraft. That's where we need to get to in the drone space. We need to be able to scale that operation so now those 5 humans can fly 25 vehicles.
That's true.
Versus 5 to 1.
Absolutely. And that comes back to the safety matrix of, how we do all of this. Now, based on this term called scaling, slightly different from the process scaling, but when it comes to, there's a million drone companies right now doing all different kinds of things in this space. And there's a lot that have fallen out for various reasons. What are you seeing in terms of our ability as an industry to scale effectively? And of course for you're probably seeing, because you're working out of, Africa and the United States, but you have a global view, at Global U. How are you seeing, scaling right now? Or is it about, private money? Is it about, that kind of like venture money? Are you seeing that it's government money that will help these companies grow? What are you seeing?
So I think overall it's, we're getting to the point where you really have to be solving a specific problem with your service or what you're offering. A lot of times we see ideas that are just kind of thrown out there, and of course AI is the popular term. So anyone who's combining drones and AI is probably getting, some sort of funding. But over time, you're going to see those fundamental problems come to the forefront. And if you're not focusing on that, then yeah, you're not simply going to last. We were talking earlier about delayed gratification, and I think that for entrepreneurs, of course, we want things to get done yesterday, right? So understanding that regulations are naturally going to take time to evolve, use cases are going to have to be proven, data is going to have to be collected before we even get to to that point. It's like managing your expectations a bit. Some of the results that you want to see tomorrow or the next week or the next month, you may be waiting for some time. So understanding that I think is also very important, and then adapting over time. The business plan or the idea that you had last year, it's probably going to need some tweaking, right? Based on how quickly or slowly things are moving. So just understanding that, yeah, you have to be ready to evolve and adapt, over time. The other thing that I'm seeing that's very important is just like niching down and focusing on one specific industry or vertical. Of course, as service providers, when we get into the industry, like our eyes are just seeing everything. It's real estate, it's mapping, it's mining, construction. I mean, there's so many different areas. But the ones who actually are able to sustain themselves and grow their business and scale over time, they have one specific focus, right? If you walk down to the floor, I mean, all of these companies are very targeted. They know who their market is, they know who their industry is. So yeah, those are the ones who are able to survive over time. But of course, as entrepreneurs, it's like balancing how quickly can we go, and then those lessons along the way.
Yeah, and I mean, 25 years. Most people are thinking I got a product and in 2 years I'm going to get this investment, and here I am on the front of Fast Company, and it's like this is an evolution, especially in a new industry. If we were all consumer products companies, then it's like, okay, people are accustomed to that, and now you just got to get in and kind of battle it out with other companies that are in that space.
And to Eno's point is, like, we weren't not making money for 25 years, right? You have to, as a business, you have to generate revenue, you have to pay, you have to have, and I think back to the wow factor of this year at Exponential, what I'm seeing a lot, and the way I say what you were talking about earlier is, in previous years there was a lot of solutions looking for a problem, right? And this year is the first time I haven't seen a lot of that. It still exists, right? But until you're actually solving a business problem and you can generate revenue by charging somebody for that, there's a tangible value, then some people with great technology struggle to find, okay, well, where does this fit in? What problem does this solve? And that's really where the business and the entrepreneurs come in, because you need to make money, and like regulatory might take 5 years. Well, okay, great. How can I make money now? I think DroneUp is a good example, because what DroneUp did was they said, well, I'm not going to wait for regulations. I'm not going to wait for the rulemaking committees and all this stuff. I know I can go do this now.
Right.
And now this has gone from X, and now they're at Y, and they're going towards Z, but they're still making money at X, right? So that's kind of where you have to have that lens of,
and there are a lot of pivots, that you've got to make in this industry, and that, brings me over to you, Matt, when it comes to, communications is what will enable us to do all of these things. The need for spectrum, 5G, and eventually getting to 6G, and how we're able to not only operate remotely, but how we're able to communicate that data back. And then also the other piece of that is the cybersecurity of that data. What are you seeing from an autonomous perspective and BV loss and automation, from a communications perspective, that will aid us in also maybe some of the things that may be hindrances right now?
So I think it plays to a couple of the previous points. One is the not providing technology solutions alone. And the other is the collaboration, which we spoke about at the start. So something I've been struck with by the collaboration, the network that I'm part of, which is the Viasat Polaris safety and communication services, and I'm sure Inmarsat must have the network of these providers, is that a drone operator that has their bright idea of the end value to the customer of that drone, needs to put the bits of the puzzle together. Now, a SATCOM module, an LTE module on their own, that is not that helpful for them to get over a threshold to be able to perform and demonstrate that they're safe to do a BVLOS operation. And so the network that I'm part of has, okay, you're going to fly with this technology, you need to demonstrate to the FAA what different multi-band presence there is on your flight path. Well, we have another company over here, Airborne RF, that can map that for you. And then how are you going to get that data to do it? And so really being sympathetic, empathetic to the end user to say, you don't really need a communications module, you need, this is what you are going to have to submit to perform your service, which is going to generate you revenue. We're going to try and go all the way through the value chain to help you. So, but that does present the problem of there are lots of people, lots of companies, lots of enterprises that are needed to get to the end goal of flight, and they're all going to want a little bit of the dollar that arrives at the very end. So we'll only succeed through collaboration, but success in every business is there will be an ever-decreasing pot of that money to go around. But at the moment, there's a lot of willingness to try and make it work and be innovative, be flexible, and not be greedy.
Back to the $75 cup of Starbucks.
Right,
It becomes really expensive really quick when you start adding all those layers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and you were about to chime in there on like scaling and.
Yeah, so we talked about the scaling, and literally just like a week or two ago, I was helping write a paper, and the question came up is like, are you really asking for scalable systems, or are you asking for tailorable systems? And it kind of made me step back a little bit and think, well, I think tailorable makes more sense. It sounds more inclusive of everything. So scalability would be part of that, but also customizing it to the needs of the customer and solving a specific customer, and then tailoring like the safety solutions. That's a huge part of our portfolio, is understanding these risks for a certain operation, because it's not going to be like the old airline model where you buy an airplane and you go fly on these air routes and everyone has the same understanding of what your mission is. It's just going to be very different, and they're all going to have very different needs.
The benefit that we had then that we don't necessarily have now is that very slow learning evolution.
Yes.
So we knew what data we needed to collect and how to apply it.
Yeah.
Today we have everyone trying to collect all the data all the time, which in your scenario is going to encumber this collaboration process. So until we get to a point where we're able to identify the meaningful intelligence that needs to be collected, we can have the collaborations and not have a $75 cup of coffee.
I've got a great example for what you're talking about. So, but first, what Matt's talking about is important too, because it's not just the link, right? It's not just the connection.
Right.
Our communication connections, and we both basically do the similar thing, but he's a product company, we're just a network company, right? So different ends of the value chain. But there's the cloud piece, there's a security piece, and it all wraps around the same thing. And then what happens when the link doesn't work? Because not every link works all the time.
Exactly.
There's going to be a time when your link doesn't work. So what do you do when that happens, right?
So the assurance.
Yes, the assurance. So, but back to the data, like good data versus bad data. Or some people are like, I don't care, I want all the data. So I was on a panel a couple of years ago, and they were talking about this customer needed to know when the lens cap was not on or on, because they had issues where the drone took off and it went out on its mission and had its lens cap on and they couldn't take the picture, right? So now they have to develop this whole suite of sensors to detect whether there's a cap on or a cap off.
Yeah.
And then you've got a link that backhauls all that data to a data center. It's cap off, cap on, cap off, cap on.
Right.
And then all of a sudden the data center gets full, so you have protesters showing up, and they thought they were talking about all caps, right? Because nobody wants a text messages that's all caps, right? And so then you go down this path, and then but nobody stopped and asked the question, why do we have a lens cap on a drone camera in the first place?
In the first place.
Because lens caps were created because of analog cameras to
Right.
protect from the light to get in that can
Right.
ruin the film, and that's why lens caps exist. It doesn't protect the lens from
Right.
anything, it protects the film. And these cameras don't have film, so why do we even have the cap in the
That
first place?
is
So that's the
incredible.
solution, right? It's
Right.
not like, let's go fill up this data center
Yeah.
with this,
Yeah.
binary cap on, cap off, cap on,
And
cap
have a
off.
robotic arm that can come down and take the cap off.
All right.
Yeah, but then all of
Exactly.
these other companies are, like, we're happy to charge you for the data to transmit the cap data about whether the cap's on or cap's off, right? But then now we've created this whole
Yeah.
sub-industry that's just meaningless because we should have really looked at what is the actual problem that we're trying to
To
solve.
solve.
Back to your original point,
Right.
like it has to solve a problem. So,
Yeah, solving
sometimes-
something that's not really a problem, if you think it
Yeah.
through, is this really necessary?
Solving the problem you created.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, okay.
requirements creep, I mean, development
Right.
101, you know?
Yeah.
Well, here's my last question. Is UTM enough to really facilitate autonomous operations aerially? Is that going to be enough? I'm sure it will evolve as well, as we start to integrate all this new tech into the airspace. Michael?
Yeah, to the organization that coined UTM, I think.
Right.
It's been a while. I think it's not enough to get to that end goal. I think it's going to give us enough room to get those use cases, get those venture capitalists that are going to say, I don't want to wait for a regulation, I want to figure out what we need to do and what are the real requirements. So yeah, I think it's enough to get us started and get those cases out and learn as we start to evolve the airspace.
Okay. Matt?
I'm not sure what the alternative is, because I think, as you say, we have to start somewhere, and you can't start with a complete in the dimensions we're dealing with. It can't be a complete free for all.
Right.
Yeah.
So it gives a foundation, and the more data there is, and the more, I guess, there will be boldness which says, look, we've got enough data that says this is an appropriate and scalable way of operating. Can we add a layer to it? But I haven't thought of or come across a better place to start or draw on another industry.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
I don't know if it's perfect.
It's pretty unique.
Right.
Well, I'm not a UTM expert, but what I will say is that, of course, data is gold in this situation. A lot of of course, Zipline, I think last week hit their millionth delivery, and a large portion of that was on the African continent, in Rwanda, in Kenya, and Ghana as well. So tapping into, of course, the vast amount of work that already has been done. Of course, there's a lot less air traffic in those areas, so they're able to test, different scenarios, more easily. But yeah, I think just utilizing these resources that we do have, more collaboration, more partnerships, across continent wide. But again, it's just, matching innovation to how fast we want, to get it done, and knowing that, these things just naturally kind of take time, to develop. But of course, as an entrepreneur, you have to be optimistic and, to the next step.
No, I think it's an awesome first step,
Yeah.
but autonomy is broader than small UAS. It's broader than air. It's covering multiple modalities. So, no, I don't think UTM is going to be all we need, but I think it's a great way to get us to start thinking differently about how we collect data, what kind of data we need, how we share information, what information is meaningful, and then how our modalities are starting to bleed over to one another. I mean, we are talking mostly about air, but that's bleeding over into smart cities now.
Yeah.
It is.
So
IoT.
we're now getting into that realm of kind of getting rid of the seams between the modes of transportation. We've got a whole lot of maritime that's happening at this conference this week, and a lot of autonomy associated with that. So maybe we should be asking, is there a way for us to learn from what these other sectors are doing with their autonomy evolutions to see what can convey, maybe we can build on them.
Good point. Good point. Joe, I'll give you the last
I
word.
completely agree. So, did I hear this correctly? Did NASA come up with the acronym for UTM?
Don't quote me on that.
No, that's okay. And there's an acronym for NASA being the National Acronym Sustainability, something, right? So this is the funniest part. I love this, and it's either NASA or the FAA, but UTM is an acronym within an acronym.
Yes.
Right.
Within an acronym. It's a nested acronym. It's UAS, and then UTM, and then USS, which is UTM Service Solution Provider, right? So I think it's hilarious. And by the way, Zipline's a great example because they got their start at none other than the African Drone Forum. Like that's when they made their big splash. So like that's really some heritage, and they've been doing that for a long time. So yeah, I think it's kind of like ATM today. Like not every single airspace requires services, right? There's unpowered airports. There are heliports. There's other types of services, right? So in the ATM, where you're providing services, that's only for specific airspaces. And I think Europe has a really good approach to this with their U-space concept, where they're just building these UTM ecosystems in these areas where they can be supported. So, however, like our focus at Iridium is we're not necessary in those urban canyons with all this great communications and technology, right? It's when you get outside of that, when you're out in the rural areas, there's no LTE, there's no other kind of communications. When you get beyond the horizon,
That's right.
right? That's where our specialty is, and that tends to be in rural, remote areas without the infrastructure. That's why, in the African Drone Forum, we've had several partners that have actually won prizes, et cetera, because they're using our connectivity where it doesn't have the infrastructure there. It doesn't have, other infrastructure too, like airports and these things, right? It's easier to do a drone program there, right? So, but I see, I like to think of it as a flexible means of compliance, right? Like we have to be able to scale the way we think about different aircraft and operations to the risk profile.
True.
Because if I'm flying over farms in the middle of nowhere, like what's my risk profile? Am I gonna get crushed from corn stalks, or if I crash, or much different than in an urban canyon when you're dealing with like much more, think about it, a 55-pound drone.
Right.
If that comes crashing through the roof here, that's 2 cinder blocks.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's the inertia that's coming through. So that there's a different safety case when you're in an urban or even a suburban area where there's a lot of ground risk. So we have to be able to scale that, and so UTM is a great concept to work in that environment because we need more information and we need everybody to share.
That's true.
But I think, when you start looking at these long endurance missions, when you look at this rural remote, like linear inspection, pipeline rail, they're flying at a higher altitude. They're flying in mixed-use airspace with traditionally piloted aircraft. So we need that interaction between UTM and ATM, how that crosses over. So
Absolutely.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you for that. I want to thank all of you for joining us on XeoCast at Exponential 2024.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
see you next one.
That's a wrap.
Yeah.